What's happening in Taiwan?
China, Taiwan,
China just uses
Taiwan.
China and Taiwan, a crisis that arises from the will of supremacy and which can radically change the global economy and the lives of billions of people, including you. But why? Why is this island so important? Why did China and the USA have debates over it? And to find answers, we need to take a look back in time. Taiwan is an island around 100 miles from the coast of southeast China. It sits in the so-called First Island Chain, which is a list of US-friendly territories that are crucial to US foreign policy. From historical sources, we know that the island came under Chinese control in the 17th century when the Qing dynasty began administering it. Then, in 1895, they gave up the island to Japan after losing the First Sino-Japanese War. China took the island again from Japan in 1945 after World War II. But a civil war erupted in mainland China between nationalist government forces led by Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong's Communist Party. The war ended with the victory of the Communists in 1949, and after that, they took control of Beijing. Chiang Kai-shek and what was left of the Nationalist Party, known as the Kuomintang, fled to Taiwan, where they ruled for the next several decades. China points to this history to say that Taiwan was originally a Chinese province. But the Taiwanese point to the same history to argue that they were never part of the modern Chinese state that was first formed after the revolution in 1911 or the People's Republic of China that was established under Mao in 1949. The Kuomintang has been one of Taiwan's most prominent political parties ever since they ruled the island for a significant part of its history. Currently, only 13 countries recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country. China exerts considerable diplomatic pressure on other countries not to recognize Taiwan, or to do anything which implies recognition. But China's desire for Taiwan extends further than historical ties. After the Communists won in mainland China and at the beginning of the Cold War, Taiwan began to build strong diplomatic relations with the USA, which led to the establishment of a treaty alliance in 1954, and it has become an important ally against international communism, with the United States maintaining a military base on the island as an unsinkable aircraft carrier from which to launch its security duties in East Asia. Taiwan history is not the only thing that China is interested in, because the real stake in the middle is money. Maybe you already know that China is interested in becoming a superpower economy, and for this reason, Taiwan is crucial. The economy of Taiwan is a highly developed market economy. It is the 8th largest in Asia and 18th largest in the world by purchasing power parity, allowing Taiwan to be included in the advanced economies group by the International Monetary Fund. Taiwan's economy is hugely important. Much of the world's everyday electronic equipment, from phones to laptops, watches, and games consoles, even the device you are watching right now, is powered by computer chips made in Taiwan. By one measure, a single Taiwanese company, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company or TSMC, has over half of the world's market. But why did this happen, you might ask? And as far as we know, when a product becomes harder to produce, in this case, the microchips get smaller, and we are getting to a point where only two companies can produce them, TSMC and Samsung. Everyone else gave up the ghost. The big US companies Intel and Global Crossing gave up at 10 nanometers because they couldn't afford to spend the tens of billions of dollars in R&D. To give you an idea of why this is hard, the silicon atom is 0.1 nanometers, so you are literally moving atoms around. The coronavirus is between 50 and 100 nanometers, which means that you are carving things into silicon that are smaller than the viruses. This turns out to be really hard and really expensive. As far as why TSMC, it was because of China. So before 2016, relations between Taiwan and the mainland were pretty good, and since Taiwan was part of China, TSMC turned out to be part of the Chinese national economic strategy. TSMC would focus on the real high-end stuff. The low-end stuff would be made on the mainland, and then TSMC chips would then go into the mainland for assembly. As part of this, Huawei was working really closely with TSMC. All this made TSMC hugely profitable and gave it the cash to go down to 7 nanometers and below. Taiwanese exports across the strait to mainland China were at an all-time high in 2021, but perhaps more importantly, the small island nation has China in a chokehold over semiconductors. In 2020, China spent more on importing chips than it did on oil. China is believed by many to be stockpiling chips. Furthermore, China won't become self-sufficient in semiconductors for at least another decade despite Beijing's huge financial commitment to China's Manhattan Project-style semiconductor effort currently underway. There is a danger that any Chinese invasion of Taiwan in the next 5 years would damage or destroy much of the tech infrastructure China relies on to feed its electronics and manufacturing industries with key components. The economic fallout of a full-scale invasion might include Taiwan's semiconductor industry becoming the spoils of war, but Equally, the Taiwanese might be ready, willing, and able to seriously sabotage or even destroy semiconductor plants themselves, most notably TSMC's network of advanced fabs, to deprive the Chinese of some of those spoils. Right now, Taiwan's electronics sector attracts the greatest share of this foreign investment. Indeed, Taiwan's significance to the global semiconductor industry cannot be understated. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company is the world's largest contract chip manufacturer and Asia's most valuable listed company at $600 billion. Much of the world's global supply chain of semiconductors is reliant on Taiwan. We have seen that China is interested in Taiwan because of its strategic position, historical bonds, and economic advantage, but maybe this is just a side quest in the biggest mission, and the main objective is world dominance. But China knows very well that its main obstacle is on the other side of the Pacific. For 75 years, the United States has been the world's self-anointed rule writer and enforcer. Intent on preventing another global bloodletting on the scale of World War II, Washington attempted to craft a world order cemented in shared norms, with international institutions to enshrine and uphold them. Backing it all up was the might of the American military. That order has been imperfect, subject to abuse by an array of countries, America included, but it has kept a lid on big power conflict while spreading economic prosperity and democratic principles across much of the globe. It's an order that, though somewhat tattered, the Biden administration is striving to maintain with. But the American monopoly on rule writing is now facing its stiffest challenge since the fall of the Soviet Union. As China rises in stature, Beijing is promoting its own concepts about global governance, development, and international relations, grasping influence at institutions such as the United Nations to infuse these concepts into global discourse, and using its growing wealth and military might contest the existing norms of the American world system. Ultimately, this is what the dispute is really about, a widening confrontation between the US and China over who sets the rules on trade and technology, climate change, and public health. Fundamentally, it is about the principles and precepts that guide how countries, companies, and individuals interact on a global scale, a competition over whether the world will be one of the rule of law or the rule by law. Xi wants to usurp the US' role as arbiter of global rights and wrongs, based on an entirely different set of criteria, such as who does and does not support Chinese interests and power. Beijing regularly imposes sanctions of its own on countries it views as a threat to its interests. Australia, for example, has faced severe economic coercion, including effective bans on key exports, for supporting an independent investigation into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic, which Beijing considers an attempt to undermine communist rule. Over time, US relations with the people of Taiwan deepened in many other practical respects. The Taipei government provided economic and technical assistance in support of US operations in Vietnam. Taiwan's economy expanded rapidly beginning in the early 1960s, with an export-led growth strategy that moved the island from an agricultural to a flourishing industrial-based capitalist economy. By the 1980s, Taiwan had become one of Asia's economic tigers. US and China tensions, however, are now being driven less by economic realities and more by great power rivalry and nationalism, factors exacerbated by mutual mistrust over each other's strategic intentions. In describing the United States' multifaceted relationship with China, the Biden administration has emphasized the need to compete, confront, and cooperate all at the same time. But as Chinese president stressed at the 2021 World Economic Forum, competition is for pursuing excellence, not killing off a rival. Due to US-China trade tensions, several Taiwanese and foreign companies formerly based in mainland China have relocated back to Taiwan. In this way, Taiwan has been an unexpected benefactor of US-China tensions and the COVID-19 pandemic, demonstrating resilient growth, says Tsai. However, a significant challenge for Taiwan is the country's failure to keep up with its growing energy demands. Taiwan has a public commitment to a net zero target by 2050, and despite having some of the world's best conditions for both wind and solar energy, progress in this area has been slow. Massive power outages in Taiwan in 2017 affected 6.68 million households, and in early March 2022, a reported accident at a power plant caused widespread power failures across the island, including in the capital city of Taipei. As the August 2022 visit by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan shows, however, the island holds a deep emotional and historical tie to the mainland. Whether practical concerns will prevail in Beijing over an attempt to implement a visionary sweep of history over Taiwan, it is clear that Taiwan's fate is inexorably tied to China as well as to economies and technology infrastructures far beyond Taiwanese borders. As it is now, the crisis between China and Taiwan is only part of China's big plan of gaining power. The US has held this power for decades, and now the Chinese want that power for themselves. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe because other episodes will come soon. Until next time, take care of yourself. Peace.